Stories to Watch India 2022. I'm Jnanada. I head the communications team here in WRI India, and very warm welcome to all of you. I'm very enthused to kind of see our partners, collaborators, some of our friends from media, listeners who are interested in this topic, all are present here for the Stories to Watch. I especially welcome our partners and our board for this evening. We are celebrating two things today. I mean, we are going to be participating in the Stories to Watch India program. We will be all listening to that. And also, this is the eve of WRI India completing 10 years of its establishment. In 2011, February, WRI India was established formally, and we are completing 10 years. So we are celebrating that. Couple of hygiene announcement. If you are digitally active, socially active, I'm going to tweet. The hashtag for this evening is hashtag Stories to Watch India. Please tweet with all these details and, as you listen to this program. We are going to start this program with our chairman, Mr. Jamshed Godrej, giving his opening remarks. I request Mr. Godrej to start with his remarks.
Thank you. Good evening and good morning and good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to the second Stories to Watch India edition. The Stories to Watch has been a very popular event conducted each year by WRI globally, wherein some of the big picture trends that would shape the year ahead are presented. Last year, we decided to introduce an India edition where a similar presentation would be made, but focused on the Indian context. Today is the second version of this India Stories to Watch. Of course, as we are all aware, a lot has happened in India and around the world in 2021. But there is also a lot to look out for in 2022. The second wave of the pandemic, which started in mid-2021, was quite devastating. And we are in the midst of the third wave, which seems to be much more contagious, but less damaging. Some believe that this is an indication that the virus is on its way out. Whether this is a scientific conclusion or wishful thinking, we have to wait and see. We also saw many extreme weather events in 2021, clearly reminding us that the adverse impacts of climate change are already upon us. But we also saw India committing at the COP26 in Glasgow to a net zero target, and more importantly, announcing 2030 targets as well. We saw an acceleration in the vaccination program. There is a step up in the electric mobility program. There is a lot of buzz around green hydrogen. Farm laws, which were a bone of contention, have been repealed, and the protesting farmers have gone back. So a lot is happening. How these will shape the year ahead will be the stories to watch. While India has committed to a net zero target, we now have to move towards implementing them. This is a very different ballgame and a significant challenge. But it must be done if we are to save our planet. It needs sizable funds and it needs manpower capacity. It requires getting everyone on board and needs communities to play an active role. It needs the corporate sector to take leadership and to do its part. Government alone will not be able to do this, and regulation alone is not enough. There has to be a sense of purpose for all of us. The good news is that the climate action is now being talked about at a much broader level. Several states and cities are looking to establish their low carbon growth paths. The states of Maharashtra, Bihar, Kerala, amongst others, have all taken a leadership role to develop low carbon strategies including an emphasis on green hydrogen. Of course, all of this needs to come together and add momentum towards our joint efforts. I must also add, as was just mentioned, that WRI India has now completed 10 years in India. It has been a very satisfying journey during which we have grown considerably and now work in multiple states and with national ministries. We have over 300 professional staff, with the main offices being in Delhi, Mumbai, and Bangalore. But with project-based staff based in Chennai, Hyderabad, Bhopal, Surat, Ahmedabad, Patna, Guwahati, and many other cities to come. To commemorate our 10 years, we will release a book that retraces our journey and presents some of our vision for the years ahead. These 10 years would not have been possible without the support of so many of our partners, well-wishers, and supporters. The board and advisory committee has provided very useful guidance to WRI in India, which has been invaluable in the work that we have taken up. We will first release the 10-year book and then have the presentation of this year's Stories to Watch by Mr. O.P. Agarwal, the CEO of WRI in India.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Godrej. Before we proceed to the launch of the book, a small announcement. Due to COVID-19, we are all meeting online and digitally. We are going to take this opportunity to take a screenshot or the photo opportunity, digital photo op. I request all of you to please start your cameras, put your cameras on, and we will quickly take a photograph. Anil and other co-hosts are going to do that. Anil, please let me know once you see everyone and take our snap.
Sure.
Is that?
Yes, Jnanada.
Yes, thank you. Thank you everyone for cooperating. It's so, while making this 10-year book, we were looking at the photographs. Mr. Godrej, from the day GHG was launched, India GHG platform was launched, we were kind of going through all these old photos, and then we combined it in this book. It has our timeline, all the kind of journeys of our various programs. I'm going to kind of upload the release slide from my end, and then going to request Dr. Khosla to announce that the book is released. Dr. Khosla, here is the cover of the book. So thank you so much. I now request Dr. Khosla, who is also part of our board. We are here to listen to you and your guidance on this occasion.
Well, it's my deep pleasure to be able to release this book, and I'm delighted to have been asked to do that. And I'd like very much to thank everyone for everything they've done for our institute. Jamshed and Ani and OP and all the others, it's really been a huge privilege for me to work with many of you over the years in one professional avatar or another, but particularly within the work of the WRI. And I'm delighted to have this opportunity to be here with you today. We have an institute that is now 10 years old. I would like to have your permission to share with you a little bit of my history with WRI. You know, I go back really all the way to the beginning. The very first meeting in the Octagon in Sleepy Hollow in Washington, nearly 40 years ago, I was there, and WRI was born. And ever since then, I've been privileged to work very closely with the Institute. I remember working a lot with Gus Speth, of course, and with Jonathan Lash. Jonathan, I didn't even know, but I got a letter in the mail a long time ago, soon after he took over, inviting me to come and spend a week in Washington as a guest of the Institute, with the only proviso that at the end of that week, I would spend a day sharing my thoughts and insights, whatever I'd seen with him. And it was a wonderful week. I must admit, I learned a lot more than I could have possibly given, but my job was simply to see and learn from WRI. And it was a great occasion, and I still treasure the memory of that week. The past 10 years in India have been very intense, but since Jamshed and I basically, together with a few others, started this institute. And in those 10 years, it's been exponential growth. And I really think it's quite exemplary what has been done. In those 10 years, the world has changed a lot. May I say, fundamentally, during a period of great transition, even more than the previous 30 that we had witnessed. And for solving many of the problems that have been coming up, WRI really is one of the key national level institutions that can help bring our nation to safe harbor before the perfect storms of biodiversity losses and climate crises and extreme poverty and gross inequity and resource destruction and runaway pollution make it too late to save our well-being, our civilization, maybe, and even our species. So our leadership as an institution is now needed more than ever before. And I think this is a wonderful occasion to celebrate not just the past 10 years, but to think about the next 10. What we've done so far has been in so many areas of cities, of restoration, of forests, of energy, and a lot of things. And it's not going to be an act that's going to be easy to follow and repeat, but I think it's our job to try and find ways to do that. We have an institute that has been exemplary in bringing rigorous science and management methods to deal with root causes threatening our lives and livelihoods. And it needs really to help strengthen our ability to incorporate human, social, and economic issues into the equation of saving fauna, flora, habitats, ecosystem processes, civilization in many different aspects. And particularly, of course, the R in the middle of our name, the resource base, the material resource base, on which I think we've spent a bit less of our energies and time than we probably ought to. So where do we go from here? We have to obviously keep our speed up and keep scaling out and striking perhaps in some new directions. And I thought I would share a little bit about the kind of new directions that I keep thinking about, both for my own organization and the organizations on whose governing bodies I sit. I hope you will understand that this is something that we have to do collectively as partnership in civil society. One, I think we have to pick up and run more strongly with the concept of resilience. We've done a lot on sustainability. The word has been overused and has become a cliche, but sustainability without an understanding of resilience is really going to be a major problem in the future. And I think we've really got to bring that center stage into our thinking. Related to that, and in the light of the lessons learned from the recent pandemic, we need to pursue the implications of the term expecting the unexpected. We have to build knowledge and systems of forethought, if you like, and allowing for things that no one, the black swan events, if you like, could have conceived of in earlier times. The third area I would certainly like to see WRI taking an active engagement in is how to help strengthen civil society organizations. We are a civil society organization, and we're embedded in a large universe of civil society organizations, but all over the world, in every major country, extending all the way from Brazil and the US through Turkey and Poland and Hungary, through Egypt and India and Philippines. Civil society is under great threat. It has really been made dysfunctional in many of our regions, and not least in our own. And I think WRI has to start finding ways in which to build up our credibility as a sector and to help bring to the attention of the powers that be how important our work is. So having said all that, I really want to come back to the idea of the R in the middle of our name. I think WRI needs to strengthen its work in the field of material resources and to help find ways in which to bring good resource knowledge into our nations and global policies. I'm talking basically about not just depletion and destruction and waste, but the idea that resources are an endowment of Mother Nature, and we now need to make sure that we leave them in good shape after us. Finally, I think we now need to start exploring new forms of generating revenues beyond projects. All NGOs are going to be suffering more and more from the lack of availability of project funding. And I think we've got to find ways in which we develop path-breaking, agenda-setting, how would you say, empower ourselves with being able to set the agenda by having access to financial resources of a new kind. So I want to thank you all, and I'm delighted that we have this beautiful book, which I'm looking forward to reading in detail as soon as I get a copy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khosla. Those of you who are registered for this event, you will receive the book via the PDF in a couple of days. We are going to, this time Stories to Watch is pre-recorded, though I must announce Dr. Okupi Agarwal is attending. He is very much present with us, and he's available for all the questions you kind of post in Q&A. He's going to take a couple of those questions. We have recorded it just to kind of manage and hedge the digital challenges that sometimes we face during the presentation. So I'm going to start with the Stories to Watch presented by Dr. O.P. Agarwal.
A very good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to you, depending on where you are. I welcome all of you to the Stories to Watch India edition of 2022. As with our inaugural edition last year, our aim is to present the big picture on a range of trends that we see around us. These stories talk about some big transitions in the making and some of the big issues facing us. In many ways, these stories are interconnected. They're really about our lives, our livelihoods, our health, and our economy. They are not just about climate change or carbon, yet they show how climate issues are so closely connected to our lives and well-being. They show how considerations of poverty, equity, gender, and justice are critical even as we work towards climate goals. They show how people have to be at the center of all our strategies for dealing with these issues. Many of the transitions need to be community-led. They need societal and behavior changes that cannot be achieved through regulation or laws, but need to be led by people. The interconnectedness of these stories only shows how planning and policy making needs to be integrated across larger ecosystems and wider geographies. But before we jump into the stories, let's take a few minutes to reflect on the past year. In many ways, 2021 proved to be both the worst of times and the best of times. It was a year of loss and recovery. For hundreds of thousands of Indians, 2021 was extremely traumatic as the second wave of the pandemic wreaked havoc, claiming more than 330,000 lives. Most families lost one or more near and dear ones. We in WRI India lost a dear colleague, and many of us were hospitalized for weeks. The medical infrastructure was overwhelmed by the sheer size of the attack. Despite the extreme challenges, our medical and paramedical personnel, as well as all other frontline workers, rose to the occasion to do a commendable job. They deserve our applause for this selfless work. In fact, most Indians came forward to help neighbors, friends, and associates who suffered in the pandemic. It showed how a crisis can often bring out the best in us. Yet, the second wave was a scary and traumatic experience that we would never like to see again. 2021 also saw devastating extreme weather events across the country. In May, Cyclone Tukte battered Gujarat, and Cyclone Yas led to floods and destruction in Orissa and West Bengal. In September, Cyclone Gulab hit Andhra Pradesh and Orissa. Floods also took hundreds of lives and displaced thousands more in Assam, Goa, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Uttarakhand, and elsewhere. Such disasters serve as a reminder that adverse impacts of climate change are already upon us, and the poor and marginalized groups are by far the most vulnerable. Despite these traumatic events, 2021 also gave hope and reason for optimism about the future. After a robust debate through the year, in November 21, India committed to a target of net zero by 2070 at the COP26 summit in Glasgow. We will also remember 2021 for the success of our COVID vaccination program. Close to 1 billion people received one dose of the vaccine, and over 700 million received both doses. Indigenously manufactured vaccines not only saved millions of lives, but also enabled India to expand its program to include teenagers, start administering booster doses, and send vaccines to other countries in South Asia and Africa. Despite the challenge of COVID times, assembly elections were successfully held in 5 states, reminding us about how vibrant India's democracy is. In fact, that vibrancy is unabated. Even as we speak, Uttar Pradesh is preparing to go to the polls tomorrow to elect a new state assembly. Towards the end of 2021, the government recognized the concerns of protesting farmers and repealed the 3 farm laws it had enacted earlier. The agriculture sector, with its complex problems, is in need of reform, and continued dialogue is necessary to find better solutions. In the past year, India, with 90 unicorns, emerged as the 3rd largest unicorn hub after the United States and China. This shows that the digital economy has got a boost even during the pandemic. 2021 also saw a 9.2% growth in the economy, the highest among major economies. This requires that vulnerable Indians must be at the heart of recovery efforts as we begin to step out of the pandemic. Let me now turn to what we should watch out for in the year ahead. At the COP26 summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced generous commitments to tackle climate change, signaling to the world that India will do its part to save the planet. He committed to achieving net zero by 2070. While that may seem too far away, he announced near-term targets as well. These include installation of 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel electricity capacity, sourcing 50% of the country's electricity requirements from renewable sources, reducing 1 billion tons of projected emissions, and achieving a carbon intensity reduction of 45% compared to 2005 levels. The fact that shorter-term targets were announced lends credibility to its longer-term commitment and shows that action towards net zero will begin right away. It is now time to move from commitments to action. This needs many different agencies, different people, different motivations, and a different level of awareness from those needed at the climate negotiating table. It requires getting everybody on board. It needs a wider understanding of the what and the why of climate action. It means community action. It means lifestyle and behavior changes at an unprecedented scale. It will need a political constituency of support to be successful. All of this is further complicated by the fact that many climate-related actions, if not managed well, can be inequitable, especially for the poor and marginalized communities. Hence, greater sensitivity to ensuring justice will be the need of the hour. As an example, a shift from concentrated thermal power plants to decentralized solar generation will mean a shift in job locations and a change in the quality of jobs. A move from internal combustion engines to electric mobility could mean reduced jobs in vehicle maintenance, but possible increases in other subsectors. These aspects cannot be ignored as we plan to lead action towards our commitments. Hence, how actions to further our climate commitments are managed will be a story to watch in 2022. Let me now turn to the next story about energy transition at an unprecedented scale. Renewable energy currently accounts for 22% of the electricity generated in India. Reaching a renewable energy generation capacity of 500 gigawatts by 2030 and sourcing 50% of the energy requirement from such sources calls for a transition at a massive scale. This year marks the first milestone in India's journey towards this goal, and the country seems to be on target to achieve its 175 gigawatt aim for the year. But making this transition at the scale needed requires a look at opportunities beyond traditional solar and wind power. Will offshore wind be one of them, given India's 7,600 kilometer long coastline? Apart from a massive need for finances, this transition will need major changes in the current distribution system, which is largely designed for concentrated generation and a large grid-based distribution system. This will have to change to accommodate decentralized generation and possible use of smaller local grids. Huge investments will also be needed in energy storage to mitigate the intermittency of renewable power. 2022 will lay the foundation towards this decade-long transition. Further, in the Indian context, this transition offers an opportunity to improve access to reliable electricity in remote and underserved areas. Reliable and renewable electricity solutions could help India transform communities in remote locations by powering their hospitals, schools, homes, and small industrial units. Hence, it is not just a story of transition to clean energy, but also a story of tackling inequities in energy supply. If managed right, this energy transition can improve the quality of rural communities and especially women. It can improve healthcare and education and also facilitate a host of local economic activities that will create new jobs. Therefore, how India's energy transition to clean energy pans out and how it impacts local communities will be a story to watch in 2022. Let me now turn to the third story around food and agriculture, which accounts for 40% of India's employment and sustains 60% of India's population. Agriculture is one of the most climate vulnerable sectors. Its transformation is necessary for building the adaptive capacity of farmers. Indian agriculture faces three broad issues. First is ensuring that our farmers are able to earn a decent income. Second is ensuring that achievements in agricultural production enhance nutritional security. And third, making agriculture more resource efficient and environment friendly. These issues can be tackled in a number of ways that span the production, distribution, and consumption ecosystem for food. There is plenty of evidence to show that diversifying the food basket leads to climate benefits and better nutritional security. Can minimum support prices be an effective mechanism to boost crop diversity? While minimum support prices exist for 23 crops, they seem to be skewed towards rice and wheat. Yet, it is millets that consume less water and are more nutritious. Can this skew be addressed by managing demand in innovative ways? In the recent budget, the government announced that in 2023, which is the International Year of Millets, it will support millet processing and marketing. Karnataka and Orissa have successfully promoted millets. Will we see other states adopting policies that alter food habits and improve consumer support for sustainable agriculture? Apart from this, investments will be needed in land restoration and improved livelihoods. Given the competing uses of land in India, how will utility-scale solar and plantations for sequestration ensure that the livelihoods of people who own or depend on the land are not adversely affected? Given that India has 18% of the world's population, but only 2.5% of its land mass, simply planting more trees may prove ineffective. Could trees that support livelihoods be the way forward? Can techniques such as agroforestry, which help boost crop yields by adding trees to productive farmland, be adopted? In the latest budget, the government has announced plans to promote agroforestry. How will these initiatives take shape and what will their impact be? As for enhancing farmers' income, could organic farming be a viable alternative? Sikkim has had a good experience with this and could offer lessons to other states. Another factor that could contribute to increasing farmers' income is reducing food loss and waste. What levers can be used across the supply chain to achieve this? What measures can be implemented for farm-level processing, storage, and transport? How can India encourage investment and entrepreneurship to tackle food loss? Let me now turn to the next story around transport. Transport systems are the lifeline of any society, enabling people to access jobs, education, and healthcare, and also allowing goods to move from where they are produced to where they are needed. Good transport systems enhance the well-being of the people and the economic efficiency of nations. They are akin to the circulatory system in the human body, with its smooth flow being a sign of good health. Transport contributes around 13.5% of the energy-related greenhouse gas emissions in the country. This is well below the global average, but will catch up with growing incomes. The urban transport subsector is likely to be the fastest growing as more people move to cities and increasing incomes make motorized transport affordable. A scary statistic is that while India's population grew by around 77% between 1981 and 2011, the number of registered motor vehicles grew by over 2,500% in the same period. This trend continues even in the years thereafter. Unfortunately, transport planning in India suffers from a high degree of fragmentation. Transport policies are decided across 5 national ministries and integrated planning has been difficult. 90% of the sector's emissions are from road transport, thus requiring a shift towards cleaner options like rail and water. However, with fragmented policy making, this has been a challenge. For the first time, the country has signaled the need for better coordination by announcing the Gati Shakti program, which seeks to plan for all modes in an integrated manner. The recent budget presented the Gati Shakti Master Plan, which takes an integrated approach for seamless multimodal connectivity. This will not only help in shifting demand towards cleaner modes, but also to improve India's competitiveness as an exporting nation. If well implemented, it also has the potential for reducing food loss and improving farmers' income. So how well will Gati Shakti roll out in the year ahead will be a story to watch. Let me now turn to the next story around urban India. Projections indicate that India's urban population will increase from its current level of about 400 million to over 800 million in 2050. This is an unprecedented demographic transition and needs to be managed well. Well-managed cities are critical for three reasons. First, as India aspires to become a $10 trillion economy from its current level of 2.7 trillion, cities will be fundamental in both enabling this growth and being equipped to accommodate it. Second, since most of the future GHG emissions will take place in cities, they will be central to achieving India's climate commitments. And third, COVID has demonstrated the challenge of high density, especially for the poor and migrant population. Therefore, cities will have to look at planning approaches that effect a good balance between density, higher economic activity, and a better quality of life for the poor. The government's recognition of the need for a new look at how cities are planned and managed is reflected in the recent budget, which proposed a high-level committee to review and recommend urban sector policies, capacity building, planning, implementation, and governance. New approaches to planning that move away from the traditional master plans to a regional approach that integrates land use and economic activities will become important. Further, the required urban infrastructure needs cannot be financed from the public budget alone. The private sector will have to step in and make the right kind of investments. We also see that the blue and green cover of cities is decreasing. In a city like Kolkata, for example, we see that green cover declined by 15% in the last decade, and the incidence of natural calamities has increased significantly. So what can a city's green cover tell us about its climate resilience? And how can cities work not just on mitigation, but on an ecosystem-based adaptation? Fortunately, a growing number of startups focusing on clean water, sanitation, green construction, and sustainable mobility have been emerging and can offer lower cost and more effective solutions to ease the burden on public finances. But they need policies and financing options to ensure that their projects are viable. All of these go to show that how India manages its urbanization will be a story to watch in 2022. While these were some of the big stories to watch, there are many others that also deserve highlighting. Unfortunately, the constraints of time limit my ability to cover all of them in detail, but let me mention some of the important developments in the country that need attention. The rapidly emerging water crisis will be a very important story to watch. Whether we are talking of electricity generation, green hydrogen, agriculture, or industry, water stress is a recurring theme. As one of my colleagues in WRI India puts it, if climate change were a shark, water problems are the teeth of that shark. The latest report of the Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change, titled Code Red for Humanity, warns that even in the optimistic scenario of a 1.5 degree increase by 2030, we will experience water shocks as extreme rainfall intensifies by 7% for each additional degree of global heating. How will we prepare for this? The recent devastating floods in Chennai are a testimony to how extreme weather events combine with unplanned urban growth to wreak havoc. Depleting water resources also have an implication for the poor, and more particularly for women who do not have access to piped water. They have to travel long distances to get enough for their daily needs. Reckless consumption and the dominance of water-intensive crops has lowered the water table, making it increasingly difficult to access water. In a country that has only 4% of the freshwater resources, despite having 18% of the world's population, efficient water management will be a critical need. What will it take to make water and sanitation services more accessible to communities that are facing the brunt of these challenges? The 15th Finance Commission has recommended a 1.4 trillion rupee grant to rural bodies over the next 5 years to improve access to water and sanitation. Last year, the government also announced the Amrut 2.0 mission to increase access to clean water and sanitation for urban households. It would be important to see how these initiatives are deployed to create a positive shift on the ground. Community-based, small-scale, local solutions which embrace traditional watershed management practices may be better than large dams that require heavy investment, flood large tracts of land, are carbon intensive to build, and displace people. These are all questions that we hope will be explored further in the coming year. Deteriorating air quality has been hitting the headlines year after year. This issue tends to come up regularly as we enter the winter months. In Delhi, the problem gets particularly acute as we approach Diwali, and the combination of stubble burning, domestic heating, and Diwali festivities converge to make the situation critical. Poor air quality has often led to the closure of schools. Slum dwellers and the homeless who sleep on pavements suffer immensely. Yet, actions seem to be more one-off than systematic. This is an issue that needs urgent action. Agricultural stubble burning is commonly cited as the reason for poor air quality in Delhi. This creates an impression that it is only a seasonal issue. However, that is not the case, and there are several other factors that contribute to air pollution. There is a base load that needs to be reduced to create space for short-term spikes caused by a variety of reasons like stubble burning and Diwali festivities. Motor vehicle emissions, road dust, construction dust, etc. are some of the year-round contributors. Reducing the pollution caused by them could create space to accommodate short-term spikes. A systematic effort at identifying the sources is called for. These sources could vary from place to place and from season to season. They could even vary across the time of day. But without a systematic effort at identifying the sources, any effort at improving air quality can be a shot in the dark. Dealing with air pollution also requires an airshed approach. This problem does not recognize political and administrative boundaries, and so an airshed approach will be more effective. Individual cities and states are constrained as such airsheds could transcend their jurisdiction. The national government will have to play a bigger role in identifying and implementing solutions. Whether we will see a scaling up of efforts to improve air quality will be a story to watch in the year ahead. Adoption of electric vehicles is projected to accelerate in India and will be another story to watch. At the end of 2021, EV sales were 3 times higher than their number in December 2020. The entry barriers to traditional vehicle manufacturing seem to be breaking down as billions of dollars are pouring in for startups in this area. We already have 18 manufacturers of 2- and 3-wheelers in the country. Adoption of electric buses is seeing greater momentum, with the initial focus being on the 9 biggest cities. Efforts at aggregating demand to bring down prices is already on. An important number to watch will be the percentage of new vehicles purchased that is electric. Delhi leads at present with over 6% of new electric vehicle registrations being EVs. There will be a requirement of 400 to 500,000 charging points in the country in the next 4 to 5 years. Will a growing charging infrastructure network boost consumer sentiment? In the recent budget, the finance minister announced that the government is planning a battery swapping policy. Swapping can be a very useful supplement to charging, as travel patterns in India do not involve long trip lengths, and swapping can be an efficient alternative, especially for smaller vehicles. This could further boost the demand for electric vehicles. Most states have announced EV policies, and many are competing to become manufacturing hubs. Unfortunately, the manufacture of batteries for electric vehicles has yet to take off in a big way. What will it take to change this, and how will it affect the demand for electric vehicles? The EV transition will provide new job opportunities in new subsectors such as charging infrastructure, and higher indigenization of EV manufacturing can also generate more jobs. But there will be losses in some segments of the auto industry. So planning for the workforce transition from the traditional automotive sector to electric mobility will be important to pay attention to. Green hydrogen is another promising story to watch. With a short-term potential to green some energy-intensive industries like steel and cement, and with a longer-term potential to green intercity road transport. On our Independence Day last year, Prime Minister announced a national hydrogen mission. A green hydrogen policy is likely to be announced soon, with production kicking off in India's first electrolyzer gigafactory in Bengaluru. The country is a step closer to becoming a global manufacturing hub for green hydrogen. It would be interesting to see how quickly this progresses over the next year and the kind of incentives that will emerge to move this forward. As we look ahead, it is worth recalling the Finance Minister's statement in a budget speech about India having entered Amrit Kal. Having completed 75 years since its independence, it has entered the last 25 years towards its march to India at 100. The remaining 25 years cannot be a continuation of the previous 75 years, and the country must move into higher gear to achieve its ambitions for the 100th anniversary. Capacity building and developing leadership are clearly key tasks before the country at all levels. This will be crucial to identify problems and solutions, work with diverse stakeholders, generate and use data, and implement solutions at a much bigger scale. Government, industry, academia, and civil society must come together to deal with these challenges. Lifestyle changes that reflect our environmental challenges will need to move into a mission mode. The responsibility for this will rest not only with the government and industry, but also with communities, civil society, and individual citizens. At the COP26 summit, Prime Minister Modi highlighted the need for mindful and deliberate utilization rather than wasteful consumption. How this vision gets translated into action in the year ahead will be an underlying story to watch. With this, I thank you for joining us today, and I hope we can together work towards an India of our dreams as we approach 2047, namely an India that is productive and sustainable as it addresses the needs of all its people while also protecting its natural resources.
Thank you. With this, we move towards the next part of this program, which is the discussion on these cities to watch, stories to watch. We are very privileged to have Motushi Sengupta. She's director of MacArthur India, MacArthur Foundation India, and Ravi Pandit, who heads KPIT and is also on our board. Both are extremely erudite and learned scholars and analysts we have here. So I'll request Motushi first to kind of give her remarks as on the stories to watch. What is relevant, what is important, and what is your take on what we need to watch out for? Over to you.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this conversation. It's fascinating, really, the way that Dr. Agarwal actually set out the set of trends and opportunities that that are opening up. And I'd really like to start by congratulating the WRI team on its work in India for 10 years. I really look forward to receiving a copy of the report. But I would also want to sort of start with a recall of my first interaction with WRI, which happened in 2016 when, in fact, prompted by the strategic shift to work on climate change within the foundation. I was really exploring opportunities to and looking out for civil society organizations which have started working on climate. And so I decided to make a visit to the Mumbai office. And in fact, it was what I came back with after the interactions with WRI team there was that this was a think tank which carried a lot of expertise and they knew their stuff. They were focused on work on the ground as well as on policy level discussions on various topics that were important to address climate change. So it's been a fascinating journey since then. WRI, as you can expect, has been part of our partner network in India. And going forward, we think that WRI has a very important role to play as we move forward. As a philanthropic funder in this space, I would like to resonate some of the issues that Dr. Khosla mentioned earlier today. It's in the last 6 years that we have been engaged in India as such on climate change mitigation action as such. We've seen tremendous amount of change. What are the main areas that we saw change taking place? Number one, I think just a very, very steep incline in the level of awareness of what climate change can do to lives and livelihoods. And this has sort of cut across policymakers at various levels, different sectors, ministries, and with the political support that we've had on the subject as such, I think there has been tremendous amount of progress in terms of putting India on the RE map over the last few years. The goal has not been achieved in any way, and the recent increase in NDC targets sort of indicates that India has not lost sight of what really needs to be done. And in that context, I think it is on civil society organizations as well as policymakers and other civic organizations to really come together to figure out ways by which we can achieve those ambitious targets moving forward. And so from our end, the type of changes that we have seen is that, there has been increase in philanthropic funding support, there has been an increase in the number of civil society organizations working on climate change. Um, and what has happened is that in the last few years, we've seen that, the debate, the conversations, the dialogues have actually started to move out of Delhi, which is, we think, is a tremendous trend to watch out for. WRI's presence has always been largely in the subnational level, and which is something we have really appreciated. But we see that overall, the entire sector is sort of moving on to looking at issues and challenges that need to be resolved at the subnational level. And this is a trend that, as a funder, we welcome. We would like to see more pilots taking happening in these subnational levels, and really, because to address climate change, we think that we really need to expand the pool of experts, academicians, community leaders, opinion leaders, and influencers who work on the subject, and try to identify ways to move forward. So working on subnational levels is something that has come out very clearly. Second is, of course, in the field, looking at ways by which we can make this entire process of move to clean energy transition equitable and not leave any community behind. And this was referenced by Dr. Agarwal's message earlier, that there is a risk, unless we are intentional about it, there is a risk that certain communities will find the impact of climate change uh, at a disproportionate level than others as such. So how can we actually also build in attention and resource deployment to make sure that those communities are also benefit out of this clean energy transition? And that's something that, as a funder, we have started to look at more closely. We still do not have all the answers, but it's been an interesting journey talking to civil society organizations, leaders, and even policymakers to figure out ways by which we can handle this transition to clean energy to a clean energy future in a much more inclusive manner, leaving no one behind. So that's been another area that we think. The third area that I would like to mention here is that, as a funder in this space, we really feel that there is need for a much higher level of philanthropic funding to find its way for experiments, trends in the sector as such. And we have been very conscious of this fact that in the long run, we would want many more actors at both at the national level and at the subnational level. But also, we need many more domestic philanthropists to come forward to actually support these processes and pilots that are taking place on the ground as such. So we are in the middle of a major drive, I feel, at many times. And frankly, the little resources that international philanthropy is able to make available is really nowhere in comparison to what is really required on the ground. So these are very, the three key trends that I would like to point out from a funder's perspective. And in fact, would congratulate the team once more for its deep introspection, as well as identifying the key trends that are going to decide our future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mahatushi, and all great points. And what we will do now is to request Mr. Ravi Pandit to respond to the stories and share your vision, and also kind of guide us to as WRI goes in the next decade. Over to you, Mr. Pandit.
Thank you. Thank you, Janda. So, my association with WRI has been over half a decade long. First as an advisor, a member of the advisory board, and now as a board member. And it has been exceptionally gratifying experience to see the areas in which we are deeply engaged. And especially in the last couple of years, the rate at which our engagement has gone up. 300 professionals operating from practically all over the country. High quality professionals, highly knowledgeable. Now attracting and energizing this team is not a trivial job. And I must compliment OP for that. I also like the format of this, stories to watch, because I think this is a good time to look at the year gone by and to look at the year to come. And doing it at the end of 10 years of operation in the country is especially very appropriate. So let me look at how I see the world around us, what we need to do, and what role WRI has been playing and can play even to a greater extent going forward. Last 2 years, the world has been ravaged by COVID. And truly, these have been extraordinary times. But I must say that what COVID has thrown out is not completely new phenomenon, but an acceleration of trends that we see over a period of time. It's a reflection of what we have been doing. It also is probably a forerunner of what we can see if we don't change our ways significantly. I look at the current problems as a problem of 3 E's, environment, energy, and equity. And very clearly, we are destroying environment at an extraordinary pace. And clearly, that environment is biting us back. Now, whether we are talking about climate, whether we are talking about diversity, in all these areas, I think the rate of destruction is just extraordinary. And it seems that the abatement of that is nowhere to be seen. So much work needs to be done in that area. The second issue to me is energy. Of course, the destroying or the deleterious effects of energy on environment are known. But I think energy also has another angle, another dimension to it, which is its impact on security, which is its impact on income distribution. How do we have a situation where few companies or few countries dominate the generation of energy and the rest of the world is a consumer of energy? What does it mean in terms of economic equations? That really is an issue that we need to look at. And the third, and to me, more important issue is the whole issue of equity. As I said earlier, COVID has kind of accentuated this problem, but this problem has been there for at least last 2-3 decades, world over, not just in India, world over. So essentially what we are doing now is we are creating a world which is environmentally damaging, uh, unproductive from an energy perspective, and uh, adversely impacting equity. This is not the growth that we want, and we need to change. And the way I look at it is that this is the time for us to reimagine the future. And what is it that we need to do as societies, but equally importantly as WRI? And I look at the levers that are available to us as 4 levers, and I call them as STEP, STEP. And I think each of these levers is important. Unless we use all of them, we won't be able to solve our problems. So application of just 1 or 2 levers may give us a feeling of having solved a problem, but it won't be a long-term sustainable change, which is what we need at this point in time. And I want to talk about each of these 4 very briefly and talk about the role that we have been currently playing as WRI and what more we can possibly do. So the first of the 4 is social engagement. Gone are the times where as a society, we can, for every problem, we can look up to the government and say the government didn't do this, government didn't do that, etc. And I believe that unless we own our problems and unless we commit to its solution, nobody else is going to solve our problems. We cannot blame anyone else for our problems. And that social engagement can only come out of our awareness. And I must say that the work that we at WRI are doing for creation of social engagement at multiple levels is indeed is very, very impressive. We can always do more. I would like to see a time when for every conversation on the reimagination of future, WRI is at the forefront. Again, as I said, over the last few years, I have seen the increased pace, and I think there is much more that we can do. The second lever is technology. And I think the only way we can change the world is by a big dose of appropriate technology. Technology for energy generation, technology for energy distribution, for energy consumption. All these are going to be progressively more important as we wean the world away from fossil fuels. All around us now we are seeing the movement towards renewable energy. Currently, a lot of it is on solar, but I think solar is not the only renewable energy that we can look at. So a lot of work happening in this area. Our role in that is indeed laudable. The kind of engagement that we at WRI have on every aspect of this energy or aspect of utilization of energy in different fields of activity. Now, whether it is mobility or just generation of energy or availability of clean energy at locations all over the country. Now, these are the areas where work is being done. I think we can also do some more for highlighting new things that are being done because, I think the current problems have completely unleashed the imagination of our younger generation. And, this 90 unicorns that we talked about, it's just a reflection of that. And I think we can do more to bring out what is being done. Now, the technology is not just has to be focused on energy. And the other area, and which Ashok mentioned very rightly, is the whole area of resources or materials. I believe that we are at the cusp of a major revolution on material sciences. How can we generate materials which are lighter, which don't use a lot of our natural resources, which can serve our purpose, which are more durable and more affordable, is an issue that we really need to look at. And I believe that, when I look at the kind of changes that are happening, I believe 50 years down the line, humanity will look back and say, how wasteful we were during those 200 odd years, subsequent to the Industrial Revolution. I think we are using the wrong energy, we are using the wrong resources, and all of that can change with our technology involvement. And I believe there is work to be done. The third aspect of this third lever is, in my opinion, the economic model. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the time to reimagine the future. Reimagining the future is going to need huge amount of resources. This huge amount of resources cannot come from government. They have to come from private sources. More importantly, they have to come in such a way that they are self-sustaining. And so for that, you need innovation. For that, you need scale. And what makes me extremely happy about this 90 unicorns is not that some founders have become extraordinarily rich. What makes me very happy is that these unicorns are showing the capital that is being poured into new areas which are redefining our world. And a new world, a new technology or a new business model cannot come in unless it reaches scale. It cannot reach scale unless there is a lot of funding. And that funding cannot come from governments, it has to come from private sources. And I believe that the unicorns that we are seeing in India are a harbinger of the kind of change that is going to happen in terms of new models and new technologies coming in. The last of the four levers is policy. Now, it's heartening to see that there is, I should say, a chorus of policies coming from central government as well as from various state governments. And we are talking about the new green hydrogen mission. We are talking about new mobility. We are talking about Gati Shakti and the whole range of new policies which are coming. And I think a continuous talk of these policies by itself has a significant effect on creation of social awareness. Now that is very important. Now implementation of these policies obviously calls for a redirection of our resources. And that redirection of our resources can only happen when we direct our resources from where they are wasted to where they should be used. Now that change, as our current experience on farm law shows, is not painless. It's actually quite painful. And how do we carry our sections of the society which are willing to look at the redirection of our resources is very important. Are we likely to be guided by a few to the detriment of many is a question that we need to ask. And what is the role that the rest of us need to take to ensure that a balance is brought? I personally worry whether the farm laws experience that we have, will it make a difference when it comes to the whole issue of bank privatization? Because if you look at the experience that we have had since the days of bank nationalization, if my memory is correct, we have lost 4 lakh crores of rupees. Now, obviously, there is a better way to run banks. But that means that some people who have been comfortable in their current positions may need to be shaken up. Will we have the will to do that? Or will we be able to carry our public in that? What is the role that we at WRI can take to make sure that happens? And that is the whole thing about privatization of multiple things. The lucky thing is that we at least had one hugely loss-making PSU move out of the governmental structures without actually so much as a whimper from anyone. So that gives me a certain degree of hope that as a society, we are now beginning to look at things that need to be done right. So the work on our hand is enormous. And as I said, every role, every work that an institution does to imagine and to bring in and to materialize a new future is valuable. And we have grown to 300 professionals, and I hope we grow to even a larger organization because much work is to be done. And that has to be done by organizations like WRI, where the culture is right, the commitment is right, the competency is right. And that's not a very That's not available in plentiful. It's not everywhere. And we have captured, I think, these three important things. We need to retain them, we need to grow them. And I'm extremely hopeful of the future that we can help sculpt through WRI. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Mr. Pandit. Extremely, I mean, the last point that you made is really something that resonates with all of us. The culture of WRI is very precious, and it has nurtured so many researchers within the fold. As we are inspired by our global World Resources Institute, the president and CEO of World Resources Institute, Aniruddha Dasgupta, is with us. And I'm going to request him to kind of give his remarks towards the closing of the stories to watch. And after that, I'm going to request OP sir to kind of respond to that. So Ani, over to you. Request you to give your remarks. How did you like the stories to watch? And what is the vision for the next 10 years of WRI? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anand. I hope you can hear me clearly. What a privilege it is to be part of this forum. Not only we are celebrating 10 years of WRI, but to privilege to share the virtual stage with Ashok, Jamshed, OP, Ravi. That was phenomenally interesting comments. So I just want to savor the moment. This is a fantastic moment of 10 years of WRI, and all of you talked about how the organization grew. I saw Madhav here with us who started all this, and how not only the organization grown on the various different impact it has had on absolutely critical pieces of work that is going on. OP, your presentation, the issues you raised from mobility to agriculture to food are absolutely, and Ashok, the issue raised of resilience as you go forward. But the point that struck me most, it is WRI's 10 years, and the privilege to be part of this organization. Is Ashok's point, the 10 years though, the moment we find ourselves is actually very different than it was 10 years back. Now I want to reflect on not where WRI is, but more where India is. I mean, India has made, as you heard from OP, absolutely significant and ambitious commitments on climate. But at the same time, as you heard from OP, it has to grow. It has to create, just to keep up with the population, millions of jobs every year. It also has to protect nature and make it resilient. So the question really is, at this moment, what path will India take? As Ravi pointed out, there are choices here to be made. Would it follow the high consumption path of West? I hope not. There's not enough resources in the world. Would it follow China, that a lot of our Indian leaders emulate? And it's a phenomenal story of poverty reduction, but also a phenomenal story of very resource-intensive poverty reduction. Is that the path India will choose? The science, and you heard from all of our fantastic speakers, that there is actually another path that is better for climate, but better for people who can breathe cleaner air, who can have jobs that are good. And that does not destroy nature. That does not take all the resources the world has to actually get our lives going. So there is a path that is not only better for people, better for climate, and better for the world, better for our resources. Now that path is not easy. It's not easy to do that simply because it's a very constrained environment. I think that's the path WRI's next phase. Ravi said, what will WRI do next? I hope, I believe, and I think OP's comments actually completely underline. WRI wants to be the partner of the government, of the civil society, as Ashok pointed out, of businesses. I think businesses play a very important role in the next step. And also, as you heard, very much in states and cities, which will increasingly play a very important part in the transition. So this transition from where we are today, to the place we need to be in India, it's going to be difficult, full of choices to be made. Our job, I hope, for WRI to be a partner of choice, that we bring the best science, the best evidence, best practice on the ground together to help decision makers, both in the public sector and the private sector, make those right choices. So that the narrow path that exists to get to a place that is better for the planet, better for people, and better for decarbonization is achieved. So that's my hope. And I can't be more excited about where we are, OP, and the leadership you have shown. And Jamshed, I don't see on my screen, but the leadership you have shown, not only for WRI, for WRI India, but for WRI in general. It's a very exciting moment for us. It's a very exciting time for India, and the leadership position India is taking and will take, I think, in this transition, a successful transition in an important emerging economy towards a more resilient future. So thanks for inviting me here, OP. It's an absolute pleasure to be. I can't wait to be part of the next 10 years of our journey in India. Thank you.
Thank you, Ani. Dr. OP, now I request you to kind of respond. You have heard everyone, and there are a few questions too. So over to you for your remarks.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Nyanada. And thanks very much to everyone who joined us for this second edition of our Stories to Watch. Frankly, the only response I can give is a promise that our next 10 years is going to be a major step up compared to our last 10 years. We are already in the process of developing the next 5-year strategy. That's WRI's sort of time horizon. We are in the process of developing our next 5-year strategy, and you will see a significant step up. We have our standing has improved significantly. Today, many agencies look to us, and we have to really respond to that trust that they place in us. So we will see a significant step up. Dr. Khosla mentioned this right in the beginning, that our last 10 years cannot be a continuation of the previous 10 years. We promise you, sir, it will be a lot more influential and a lot more effective. We look forward to working with all civil society. We will take your advice. We will plan to step up our resilience work. I think that's very good advice that you've given us. Both Motoshi and Mr. Ravi Pandit spoke about subnational leadership, plus about owning the problems and finding solutions, not depending on someone else to find the solutions. I think that's both very good advice to us. And really, in response to that, one of the things we've been doing is we have come up in partnership with some other leading institutions. We feel a program on capacity building, which will aim to create about 5,000 to 6,000 leaders in climate change management, spread across the country at an operating level, whether it is in municipal corporations, whether it is in Zilla Parishads, whether it is in block development offices, really create a little nucleus of people who can lead climate action. I mean, one of the things that we have talked about and thought about is a lot of this leadership will have to come from communities. And how do you build that capacity in communities? So this is a program that we are taking up. Some initial steps have been taken. We've sort of tied up with the Ministry of Urban Development. A little flyer has gone out. In fact, a few days ago, we had a very interesting tweet from Mr. Hardeep Puri, who's the minister of that, congratulating us for this work being taken up. So frankly, it's sort of a delight to hear everyone, a delight that everyone could join us today. It's sort of very encouraging to us and gives us the strength to really move ahead. So with this, let me really, thank our donors, thank our board members, thank our advisory committee for the immense support that we've got from you, your generosity with your time, your sort of contributions, the sponsorships, the partnership. I think that is what has made our journey a successful one over the last 10 years. Frankly, a very, very special thanks to Mr. Godrej and Dr. Khosla who have been pillars of support for this entire journey over the last 10 years. Dr. Khosla actually mentioned his involvement from 40 years ago, something that I didn't know about. We've known you as being our founder director along with Mr. Godrej, but the kind of guidance, the kind of vision that we've had from you has really given us immense strength and confidence. I also take this opportunity to thank Ani. Every time I get into a conversation with Ani, I leave that conversation energized. I mean, it's unbelievable the kind of energy you're able to impart on someone who's just spoken to you. And today I know how busy your calendar is, yet you've given us an hour and a half and spent this whole time with you. Ani, thanks a lot. Now, WRI came into existence on the 11th of February 2011, as Jnanada mentioned to you right in the beginning. Today, we are on the 9th of February 2011. It's really, almost to the date. It's our 10th anniversary, completing our 10th year. In 2 days from now, we begin our second decade. And as I said, our second decade will be not just a continuation of the first decade, but a significant step up. That's the promise we make to you. Now, in the past few years, we've as has been highlighted in a lot of the comments that have been made, we've been working with subnationals, we've been working with states, we've been working with cities. Increasingly, we've started working with many national ministries itself. Now, in the Indian context, we find this to be very useful because quite often we find that we are the ones helping connect subnationals with nationals. And they quite often see that as a convenient way of getting things done. I think that's the influence, or that's the convening ability that has proved useful in many ways. So we are really hoping that we'll be able to scale up all this and really count on your continued support from all our partners, our donors, our advisors, all our friends. And we hope with your support, we'll be able to keep the needle moving in the years to come. Really take India into a greener and more equitable future. Once again, thank you very much to everyone. Back to you, Jnanada.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for attending, all listeners who join us. We will be sending the copy of the book, the 10-year book, and you'll see all the details and the photographs and the timelines. And thank you so much, everyone. With this, good night and good luck. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much to everyone. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.